ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.
My name is David Morgan. I'm Arlington's Environmental Planner and Conservation Agent. The January 2nd, 2025 meeting of the Arlington Conservation Commission be conducted in a remote format consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extended remote participation in public meetings until March 31st of this year. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording may be made publicly available. The materials for tonight's meeting are the link that I've just put in the chat. Please note that chat feature may be used for questions and comments that facilitate the commission's proceedings. If it's used otherwise, may be disabled at the chair's discretion. There's a public comment period to follow each hearing. We don't have any hearings this evening, so it's not going to be relevant tonight. Chuck Tirone is our commission chair. He'll facilitate tonight's meeting. Each vote taken during the meeting will be a roll call vote. We always begin with agenda and attendance review. So over to Chuck to do that.
Sure. Let's review the agenda for January 2nd, 2025. I'm going to start out with a discussion about a certificate of compliance for 1165R Mass Ave. Then a new access route in Arlington Great Meadows, salary offset. I'm not going to go through the whole agenda, but we have some discussion items, and then we're going to finish up with a hearing on Thorndike Place, which is going to be continued. So don't stick around for that if you're here for the Thorndike Place hearing. And we won't be discussing anything about that at tonight's meeting. So with that, I'll go right into attendance. David Kaplan.
Present.
Mike Gilderscame.
Present.
Brian McBride.
Present.
Susan Chapnick.
Here.
David White.
Here.
Nathaniel Stevens.
And could I make a request? I'm going to log in on another laptop. I'm just trying to debug this one since I keep freezing, if that's all right. So if I can log in, I'm going to just log in on the other laptop. You'll see me twice, but I'll turn off the volume and stuff. Thanks.
Yep.
So that was Nathaniel Stevens, and he's also here along with being the IT guy. So and Chuck Tirone is here also. So Sarah Alfaro Franco.
Present.
And Eileen Coleman.
Here.
Those last two are associate members. So on the agenda, we have a discussion item, but I did ask Susan Chapnick to look at the last couple of meetings and let us know what we said about 1165R Mass Ave, because I think there was some instructions given to the applicant.
Yep. So it was actually December 5th. Where we discussed the certificate of compliance for 1165R Mass Ave. Excuse me if I'm looking sideways. I'm looking at another monitor to read it. Randy reported the deed restriction was getting finalized. It was special conditions 56 and 57. The commission had a discussion of the pros and cons of issuing a COC with the continuing conditions or have a recorded deed restriction. Nathaniel made a motion. David White seconded the motion to continue to December 19th to expect to see a recorded deed restriction before issuing the COC. But December 19th meeting, we did not have any information. So we didn't see the deed restriction on the December 19th meeting. I think that was the meeting, David, you weren't there? Or were you there and there was just, we didn't get the we didn't get the information we wanted yet?
Right. I had a meeting with town council to go over the requirements of the restriction, and I communicated that with Daniel St. Clair, who's on tonight, about sort of the form that the restriction needed to take. And subsequently received, let me see. Trying to get a date for you. Yeah, on the 19th. Materials that I then passed to town council again for them to review in terms of their compliance with the town's expectations / the order of conditions. And the response that I got from assistant town council was that the easement as drafted is acceptable as to legal form, and naturally it's up to Concom to decide whether it meets the order of conditions satisfactorily.
Right. And I just heard Susan say that at the December 5th meeting, we asked for a recorded deed restriction, but I don't even think this commission was able to review a deed restriction, and that was also part of the conversation. So I'm curious about this discussion item number A on the agenda, which just suddenly appeared.
Is this, so I'm confused too. We asked for a deed restriction because that's what's in our special conditions. That's what's required, those words. And now, David, you're talking about something else that's not a deed restriction, or am I misunderstanding?
Daniel, do you want to chime in and run down the summary for everybody of the timeline that we discussed today?
Sure, I'm happy to do that.
Yep, go for it. Sorry.
So hold on a second. Before we get into this, I mean, I get there's going to be a summary of our expectations, but the commission asked for a deed restriction and we didn't get to review a deed restriction. I could somewhat see you coming back if it was on the agenda, if it was part of a packet and we had some feedback on it. But I just feel like we're going to get to the same spot that we were at the last meeting. Daniel and is it Mike? This was put on the agenda without any review from the chair and the vice chair. And I think that we would have brought up the same thing that we're bringing up now, which is we want to review, well, we asked for a recorded deed restriction. So I'll give you a few minutes, but I think that's what we're looking for.
So we have a deed restriction that's been fully drafted, been vetted back and forth by town legal counsel. There was some question as to what the form of that would be. Would it be a deed restriction or something that would be at a more elevated level, like conservation easement or restriction? And I think the discussion about whether it would be a deed restriction, which is what we assumed from the beginning, and what the form and substance of that would include, or would it go to that next level, which would require state, the chairman of the EOEA to sign off on it. It was determined not by me, but by others, and I think by discussions amongst members of this group, that it did not need to be a conservation restriction, but in fact, a deed restriction that did a couple of things. One, it protected the land under the water. It protected the land on the banks adjacent to the water. It does those two things. And it also provided access to the town to get to see the the restricted area. And that's clearly included in the deed restriction. This deed restriction has been written now for many, many months. I'm not quite sure why it's not getting to the right person, but I'd love to, I know Dave and I have talked about it now a couple of times. He sent it back to legal counsel. Legal counsel for the town has confirmed it is doing, at least to my knowledge, what is asked for it in the comprehensive permit, and it's the right form of agreement. And so I think we're where we need to be. We have not recorded it because we want you all to look at it to confirm that we're doing the right thing before we record something and then can't, unrecord it. So that's where we stand. It's ready to be signed and recorded.
It sounds like it's ready to be reviewed by the Conservation Commission and get our feedback. I think
Okay.
that's where we are. And then once you have that, then you could record it. And once it's recorded, you can come back for your certificate of compliance. And that could happen on the same meeting, but it has to happen kind of in that order. So I want to just, and this is just a request for a certificate of compliance. It's up to the commission, but I'd like to see that information one more time. I don't know if any of the commission members want to ask some questions tonight, but I'd like to see it in our packet so we can review it, get some feedback to you, if any is needed, and then move on to the next step, which is a recorded document and then a certificate of compliance. Are there any questions from the Conservation Commission? Nathaniel Stevens.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. David copied me on the email to town council, so I had an opportunity to look at it. A few comments. Yes, I mean, technically it's a conservation easement, which is not a conservation restriction. That's correct. And I guess in the conservation, my experience is the conservation easement is a way to try to get around the state law that says that a deed restriction is only good for 30 years. It can be renewed for another 20 years. So the idea of a conservation restriction is that you try to get around that. But it's, in my mind, it's a little bit iffy. But if town council says that an easement is the equivalent of a restriction, then I'm fine. I just had two comments. I think that the language needs to be tightened up so that it's in the name of the Conservation Commission, not just the town of Arlington Attention Conservation Commission, because the Conservation Commission is its own legal entity. It can be sued and sue. It can hold property interests in and of itself separate from the town. So I would ask that revision be made. I haven't discussed this with the town council yet. And then also one of the exceptions here, the reserved rights, I had a question about. So the document says the grantor, which is the owners of 1165R, agrees that they will not impair or interfere with the purpose of this easement for stormwater flood control, except for they reserve the right to install, maintain, repair, replace, and or remove existing structures in the stream and bank easement area. To me, that's a pretty big loophole that needs to be tightened up on that. So I just had a question. Maybe Daniel can answer that, or it's something we need to talk to their council about. But it just seems that wording is overly broad and counter to the document.
I see your point on that. I think the intent of that is structures that are related to the function of the stormwater treatment and drainage. So it would have to be per the design. The design is codified in the approved drawings and engineering drawings for the project. So it would only be structures that relate to that.
To stormwaters. Okay. So maybe we say stormwater structures or stormwater BMPs or something to that effect. So
Sounds good.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
So those were, I think,
happy to address those issues.
Thanks.
And if there's any other comments, if it would be great to get whatever
Unfortunately,
feedback.
I think
Nathaniel is the only one that's. No,
Yeah.
I think Nathaniel was the only one that was part of that email.
Yeah.
And you may be getting more comments at our next meeting.
It's fine.
So, I mean, I like that, but sure. Let me just follow up with Nathaniel for a second. So stormwater structures, would they consider the entire stream a stormwater structure? And my concern with that would be maybe we don't. And then, usually what ends up happening, the maintenance end of these situations is just in front of the culvert, just in front of the entrance of the culvert. So if you needed to do some maintenance there, head wall or something, clean up that, you could talk about that aspect of it. In my town, DEP won't actually let us go beyond the invert of the culvert because there's no way to, what's a general permit? So there's no way to quantify all the disturbance that we do throughout the town. So we're stuck right there. But I understand from my experience that that's usually where all the problems are. I guess that's what I would bring to the conversation. I saw David Kaplan first, so sorry, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. And I'm just looking at the document on the Google Drive. I just noticed that it was there, but I did want to point out just a couple of things that I saw. One of which was in prohibited uses, number 3, so 2A3, it looked like there's reference to a drinking water supply. Not sure if that applies here and if that was just relic language that could potentially be cleaned up. And the other thing, and some of the, I'm just curious too, does the commission or the town feel the need? I saw the exhibit with the map. Do we need a meets and bounds description of this area, or is that too much information? And what was I think I may have had another one. I think it was those only those two. So just a comment and a question about the exhibit.
Meets and bounds always helps, especially something that's in perpetuity like this. So I think that's a good idea. There is a diagram. I don't know, Daniel, if you have the plan that was circulated around, or David Morgan can screen share, maybe folks can take a look at that. That might generate some thoughts.
There are 2 diagrams. One is for the land under the water, and the other one is for the land on the banks.
Mm.
Oh, I have an Exhibit A, Ryder Brook deed restrictions. Exhibit A is all that I saw.
Yeah, that's what I saw. Revision 10. What was it? 10/10/24 on the drive.
Right. So there are more exhibits.
So we didn't get everything, I guess.
I'm not receipt of those other exhibits.
Pardon me?
I didn't have those other exhibits, Daniel. I have only Exhibit A.
Okay. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're all captured here. So we had a number of versions of this. So what this shows, you see the drive coming in. That's the vehicular access way that gives the town or the Conservation Commission, however we want to write it, access. And then it shows. So I'm mistaken. It shows both the pieces here. There are not 2 exhibits. My apologies. It shows the bank easement and the stream easement, and then it shows the area on the edges for access. Previously, we had an exhibit that only showed, it did not differentiate between the bank easement and the stream easement. And one of the questions we got back, and this was probably 6-7 months ago, we want to differentiate those 2 easements. We said, okay, great, we can put it in this exhibit. And I believe town council has reviewed it, but obviously you all need to be satisfied with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
If anyone, I was going to move to Susan. And Brian, I see that your hand's up.
Yes. So walking the site as I have, were you there, Chuck?
I've been there, but the last time I
Okay.
was not there with you.
Okay. So when we walked the site, and I believe, was it Mike? You were there?
I was.
Yeah. We were concerned with maintenance. Our concern was that they'd be allowed to do it because we were concerned that the design, the way it is, may or may not need some tweaks when there's significant rain events. We were concerned about very high volumes of water turning a very sharp corner, and how that would affect the bank. And we were concerned with the integrity of the banks. So we actually would encourage maintenance as long as it was done correctly, because we feel if we restrict and minimize maintenance, this is not going to function. So,
I believe
so I know
there's-
there's got to be a nice balance between having a loophole, like Nathaniel said, and allowing enough maintenance for it to work.
Well, let me address your point about maintenance, and I realize it's in the context of the discussion about the whole comment about structures and whether that's like a physical precast piece of concrete or whether that's the whole assembly of earth and bank and riprap and everything else. We are required to maintain the entire Ryder Brook easement drainage area per the original design. So there's nothing that we're doing that would suggest we're trying to step back from that. You know, we're not passing that responsibility on to anybody else other than giving the town rights, obviously, to come into this. And so however you guys want us to write the language that would appropriately put on us the need to fix the bank or a structure, a physical structure, or a part of the broader assembly of structures, that rests with us for sure.
So what I'm trying to say, Chuck, and maybe you want to go walk it, it can't be just the culvert where this is coming in. The whole thing is kind of a new structure, and it's going to need attention, I think.
Yeah, I just can, so this was important for this to have jurisdiction, and I think the commission wanted that. But now it seems like but what you're describing would sound to me like a stormwater structure, which they could maintain with all the vegetation and bank and all that, but also be able to go in there and repair it without the Conservation Commission, approval. So how does the jurisdictional stream, which this is and was voted to be, how do you allow all that work? And, I could only say that you would allow it with some sort of maintenance plan that we also approve. So if there's one for it, great, then that makes sense. But if there's not, maybe that needs to be discussed also. What's the line where you come back to the commission on Ryder's Brook? So let's go to Brian McBride.
Oh, right. Yeah. Just a quick comment. When I heard the description of this document earlier, I expected it to have some conservation aspects to it in terms of preservation. I know it's just a rocky waterway today, so there's not really a natural habitat to protect. But this document doesn't have any conservation aspects per se that I might have expected. And I guess maybe that's not a surprise to everyone, as the nature of this channel is pile stones. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, so
there's a very detailed landscape plan that was put together with this that isn't reflected in, the legal easement drawing here, but is part of the bigger Conservation Commission approval, which also relates back to the comprehensive permit. And, there's design and landscaping and maintenance of landscaping and maintenance of the drainage area. Those are all built-in requirements that we've submitted and have been reviewed as a part of this larger construction and completion project.
Yeah, understood.
Are there any other questions from commission members?
I just wanted to add on to what Brian was saying, that this issue of a deed restriction or conservation restriction is separate, I think, from that maintenance plan that you're looking for. If I'm not in error, I believe they're two separate documents. I'm not sure how they're linked.
We didn't request a maintenance plan. This is in relation to a certificate of compliance where we were concerned about the deed restriction. If we want to make this a bigger issue, I I don't know that we want to do that at this time because there's a
No.
lot of safeguards in the permit itself already
Hmm.
about planting and about replacing vegetation,
That's what I was
monitoring,
referring
and
to.
all that is there already.
Right, that's what I was referring to, I think.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
Sorry, I
Nathaniel?
jumped in there, Chuck.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I see Nathaniel's hands up.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that. I think what Mike just said was what I was going to say. Although I'd comment to, I'm sorry, Mike Gilderscame said after what Brian's comments were. It does say, Brian, it does touch a little bit on the purpose of the easement. I mean, it's not as robust as a conservation restriction or would otherwise be, but it does say this, the purpose of the easement is to allow the Conservation Commission, the grantee, with the right to, in order to maintain and protect the critical stormwater handling and storage capacity, and it gives us the right to, among other things, conduct routine inspections. So we could go in and inspect, and then if we see an issue, we could utilize our Wetlands Protection Act authority and bylaw authority to issue an enforcement order to fix something if we see something askew or non-compliant with the permit. Hope that helps.
Okay,
I think so. Chuck, could I jump in?
sure.
Back on what Nathaniel just said. The protection is required under the comprehensive permit. The order of conditions simply restated that it needed to be done. And the 56 and 57, those number conditions that Susan referred to earlier, says simply based on the agreement of the comprehensive permit, ... It shall be protected in perpetuity through a recorded deed restriction. So to me, that says that there are no additional requirements as have been discussed tonight. It also says to me that what needs to be done is simply recording any deed restriction. I think we're lucky to have an applicant who is forthcoming and willing to work with the commission and make sure all of these details are sussed out to the commission's satisfaction, because strictly speaking, they could record this document today and satisfy this condition, and we wouldn't have any say in it. So I know that the full commission has not had considerable time to review it. We're coming back from the holidays. I posted it to Drive as soon as I was able. We have had legal take a look at it. Nathaniel's put his eyes on it. We've had discussion tonight. I think that this document's in pretty good shape, with maybe some of the exceptions that Nathaniel raised about tightening up the language, but I otherwise see this as in very good shape and think we shouldn't belabor the point.
So what's your suggestion, David?
If I was a commissioner, I would move to issue the COC.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I didn't even read this.
Yeah,
And
David, this
Nathaniel
doesn't feel
had
right.
some specific, Nathaniel and Dave Kaplan had some specific changes that make sense to me. So I wouldn't approve it without those changes to begin with. So I need a changed version and then read it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't see it over the holidays.
And I would add to that the commission took a vote. And that is where I see this going. But I do like the fact that it's moved forward a little bit. So let's get the document on the drive with the changes that we discussed tonight. It does need to be recorded, and then you can come back to the commission. David, I want to let you know that this applicant could take this document and record it tonight, but this commission still has the right to not issue a certificate of compliance. Okay?
Yeah, I would just echo Chuck's point, I think David, in the future, even if it's not specifically stated in the condition, I think it's wise. I mean, as the other David alluded to, they don't want to have to try to unrecord something if we're not happy with it. So I think it's just an expeditious wording that we used in that condition. We probably should have said a recording of a conservation restriction in form satisfactory to the commission would have been the way to specify that. But I think most applicants know that it's in their best interest to come and get the commission to agree to the language before anything's recorded.
And I will say I'm sorry, Daniel. We didn't realize all this back and forth and that you've been going so long. Obviously, there was some communication glitches because we never intended a CR. And I know that was some of your back and forth. So apologize from the commission about that confusion. But you see where we are now. We have to read the language of the final one before we can say, yes, you're fine.
Understood, and I appreciate it. Can we just outline what the next steps are and the timeline for those? I'm happy to take the comments that you've mentioned, do our best to incorporate that, as long as they're consistent with everything that we've done and worked on before. It sounds like these comments are rational and reasonable. Let's hopefully not, reinvent the wheel with them, but take these few comments, put them in the document, and do I come back to you with, are you giving me these comments? Do I come back to you with a red line saying, here's how we've incorporated them? Is that another meeting, then we record it? Or is there a more expeditious way to go back and forth with that?
I think you're looking at 2 meetings. I think you can incorporate these comments and let the commission review them for the next meeting. And if you showed up, that would be great. And we could discuss them. And then once it's finalized, then you could record it, come back when that happens, and we'll issue the certificate of compliance. Or at least
And
we'll have
actually,
that
you don't have to
discussion.
come back with the certificate of compliance. You just have to come back for the deed restriction draft. Then the next meeting, we can do the certificate of compliance without you here, if, that's more convenient.
Certainly
that
don't
looks
mind
like-
seeing you.
That looks like we could wrap this up on February 6th.
So there's a meeting every 2 weeks, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And so how do we go about gathering from you the comments that we've talked about, so that I know that people have reviewed it and we were able to get people's comments addressed?
So for tonight's comments, I think that either David could write them up, or you could review the Zoom meeting online. That could be made available to you also. I don't think that would probably be the best way to get the best notes, either getting from David Morgan or just review the meeting again and grab the comments from there. If you've missed something, at our next meeting, we are going to be discussing the language of the easement. So it'll be brought up then.
And will there be any further comments, or are you guys set on the comments that were discussed tonight?
No, there's at the next meeting. Let's see. Where are we at here? So we're on the 2nd. So the 16th, you could receive additional comments.
Although there's probably not anything prohibiting a commissioner from sending comments to David Morgan, who could send them to Daniel in the
Right.
intervening time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why can't we do that?
Yeah, we can, but no promises that's going to solve everything. Sometimes they're more complex than that, and a discussion needs to happen. But I think what could happen is we could give you some assurances that with these changes, this is on the 16th. With these changes as discussed tonight, David Morgan could review it and ensure that the changes are in there. Then you could record it and come back at the next meeting, which seems like it would be on the 6th. So maybe that's a path forward, along with individual commissioners sending David Morgan their comments.
Great. All right. Well, I'll work with David to try to be sure we document all the changes both that we've heard tonight and hopefully any others that we get. It'd be great if we could get those. I'll be sure I've got back to David in time so he can share at the next meeting a red line of those changes so you can see that we put them in there. And I'll be back here on the 16th to be a part of the discussion.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you
All right,
very
Daniel,
much.
thank you, Mike.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Do we need a vote to continue?
no, we don't.
Usually we don't, okay, because we've done that before, but maybe we don't need.
Okay, so moving right along, we have a proposal for a cross route in Arlington's Great Meadow. I think the Lexington pathway is what we're talking about, and obviously it's more than a pathway, but let's bring that up right now. And who's here for that? Could you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, I'm Mike Tabazinski from the Lexington Greenways Corridors Committee. And also online today is Keith Omar, who is the chair of that committee. And if you'd like, would you like me to share my screen and run through
Sure.
the slideshow, or how do you want? Okay, no problem.
David, have you let Keith into the meeting? I don't see that he has his video on.
I see his name there.
Yep, there you go. Okay, great. All right, Mike, thank you. Why don't you present your project?
Okay. So this is about proposed new across route in Arlington's Great Meadows, which we casually call AGM for short. My name is Mike Tabazinski. I've been working with David White and the Friends Group for, I guess now it's getting pretty close to almost 25 years. And the GCC is the Greenways Corridors Committee, is a select board advisory committee. And there's a lot of language here, but our bottom line is trail connections, open space, and getting people outdoors. So I'll leave the across acronym as a homework assignment, but this has been our flagship project since 2011. And it's basically to develop a network throughout the town that also connects into other towns as well. And in this project and in this network, for relatively obvious reasons, we prefer off-road travel as opposed to traveling on sidewalks or busy traffic-filled streets, because we want a better experience for people who love the outdoors. At this point, currently, our coverage goal is that we want basically if all residents in Lexington are within a 10-minute walk, which is about a little less than 0.5 miles as the crow flies of an across route. And that's our eventual goal. The current status as far as that progress is that we have 15 routes on the ground, totaling approximately 50 miles, which covers about 82% of the population. And we expect to add about 12 more routes in the years coming up. Okay. Now, currently, we actually have across routes going through Arlington's Great Meadows, as well as Arlington's Reservoir. And this is what the markings currently look like. I took these photos not long ago. We have a few arrows and some small across logos on trees or on posts. And they intentionally, we took the Lexington banding off this so there can be no mistake about who is managing this land. And as far as this project goes, the most we may need to install might be a few 4-foot wooden posts similar to what you're seeing here. And over on the right photo, you can see that we have signs wherever an across route enters Arlington's Great Meadows. We have a sign reminding people that this property is owned by the town of Arlington. So it's not, no one can mistake it as being Lexington managed or Lexington conservation land. The graphics now. Hopefully you can see a pointer here on your screen. And this yellow route is what we're calling concept route number 22. And you can see it goes through an area between Woburn Street and Maple Street that's in this pink color, which signifies that this is an unserved region of Lexington. So that's our rationale for why we would build this particular route. A section that we need to go through Great Meadows. And I'll zoom in on the next slide. And this section right here, also in yellow, is route concept 22 that we're proposing to add. And section right here that we're just adding new markings in terms of new letters. And then there's a section here that we are actually creating a new trail where one essentially doesn't exist. The current situation there is the Emerson Gardens condo complex is pretty large and right in here. And they basically have a private entrance right here at this location. And that entrance has for years been open to the public and used by the public to access Great Meadows. Technically, they're using private property, but the condo complex has not really said anything. To my knowledge, we've never seen any complaints about that. So all we're doing here is we're just making it official and providing a wooded route to get to Maple Street. So this will be a new access point to Great Meadows from public Maple Street without having to use private property.
Yeah, Mike, can you hold on 1 second?
Sure.
David White, is that the area where the Scout built the new kiosk?
No.
Okay. I can't, Mike, I can't see your cursor, so I just want to make sure where you're directing us.
Neither can I. Right?
New kiosk is by Sheila Road.
Sheila Road is down roughly around the middle of Great Meadows and a little bit 2/3 to the right of where my screen
Oh, I
is.
see Sheila, yeah.
Yeah, it's down at the end. Yeah, that's where the newest kiosk.
And the C&D trail goes by the new kiosk.
Mike, is this area near the old nursing home? Is that the
That's gone.
area we're adding a trail?
It's not too far away. There's a small P for parking symbol at the end of Emerson Gardens Road, up more or less near the top of your screens. It's right up here if you can see my cursor. And
The nursing home was up there.
Yeah, that's where the nursing home used to be, and now there's residential development there.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah, that cursor's not available to see. But
okay. I have no idea why. It must be something with the PDF reader, I guess. Okay. So to get a little bit more specific, I took some photos, and this is basically traveling northwest. So it's starting within the meadows and heading towards Maple Street. And in these photos, the buildings are the Emerson Gardens condos. The bluish line is our probable route that we would be using. And the reddish line is actually the property line, which is on the edge of the Emerson Gardens driveway and park. So Arlington owns all the way up to that point, and all of this sort of grassy area and leafy area that you see with the small shrubs belongs to the town of Arlington. And so we're choosing to put the route through this because it's previously disturbed land. It's pretty open. We don't have to really make any changes. We're just taking people off of private property and putting them onto public property. And that land is currently, as a note, maintained by the Emerson Gardens Condo Association. Their landscapers actually mow it, and maybe they blow the leaves off. I'm not really sure what degree of maintenance they do, but they definitely do mow it. So in summary, this is basically the work that the GCC is needing to do in Arlington's Great Meadows. We have 1.19 miles of existing. We're going to add about 1/3 of a mile added, and about 854 feet of that is a new trail. And this will probably require some wetlands permitting, with the Lexington Conservation Commission. And the applicant of that will be the GCC. So Arlington does not have to get involved in that in any way. And work will do minimal groundwork. I think we just need to basically rake the trail, maybe trim a little brush, and it's mostly just putting up markers. And it'll all be done by volunteers. There'll be no construction machines coming in. And going forward, Arlington has no responsibility for maintaining this. It will be done by the GCC. And the best news of all is that all of this happens at no cost to Arlington. Basically, you folks don't really have to lift a finger to provide some written documentation of your decision if you choose to grant permission to do this project tonight. So, any questions or comments?
Yeah, let's find out. I see a few hands going up. First, I see Susan Chapnick.
Thank you. That was great. And I walk in AG's Arlington Great Meadows all the time, and I love the trails, and I've used a lot of the other across trails in Lexington as well. So I really appreciate them off the bike path, and it's really a lot of fun to do that. So I have just a few questions. Based on what you said, I assume you're not taking down any new trees or shrubs?
No, we don't need to take down any type of sizable trees. We may have to trim a few of those shrubs, which I believe are actually they're kind of decorative shrubs that were planted, I believe, after they excavated that hill to build the condos. So yeah, we're not digging anything up or cutting anything down.
Okay. And you're not placing anything on the trail, no surface. It's just still going to be just what it is now?
That's
Grass?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It'll be natural surface. We're not bringing in any outside fill or any type of gravel or anything like that.
Okay. And then you're going to maintain it by mowing it, or how are you going to maintain it?
I think initially it will be just the mowing that's happening. We'll keep it maintained. In the long run, if it starts getting overgrown, like say, for example, the gardens stop doing the landscaping work, which I don't think would be a terrible idea. I'd like to see the place get reforested eventually. But if that's the case, then the GCC will send volunteers, the conservation volunteers from time to time, to just trim back the shrubbery that might be overgrowing.
Okay. And is there I know that sometimes there's a large volunteer organization in Lexington, stewards to remove invasives and plant natives. Is there any plan to do that in this area, or this is just at this point just a trail?
At this point, this is just a trail.
Okay.
Our volunteers have done work in AGM before.
Yeah.
And that will happen again in the future. So whatever future needs that Arlington has for maintaining this, definitely give us a shout, and we can get some bodies to help out.
Thank you. That's all I have, Chuck.
Sure. So Brian, well, wait a minute. Was it Brian? Yeah, it was Brian. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is great, and I love the work you guys are doing. So congratulations. My only little concern I wanted to air was there's no chance this would become a bike commuting path. It wouldn't lead anyone anywhere useful in that sense, right? We've got the bike path on one side and Lowell Street on the other. So I just wanted to make sure there's no risk of excess or too heavy traffic based on the new path.
We don't believe that will be the case because, as you pointed out, there are plenty of roads and sidewalks in the area to get around, and at any time you're really less than a half mile from the bike path, which is paved and smooth. And even though crowded, a lot more efficient way to get around if that's how you need to get around. The across system is not really designed for transportation, although we know some do use it for that. It was really designed to get people outdoors into scenic areas and into natural areas. And really all of the routes are circular. So if you get on a route and follow that route letter, you go nowhere. You come back to where you started. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. That's great.
Sure. David White.
Okay,
David.
basically, I think they've done a lot of good work at Great Meadows over the years, and this is extension of their other trails. In terms of our responsibility, I think the select board has to make the final approval of this project. So we can recommend to select board our decision, but we can't really decide ourselves since we are not currently managers of this land.
All right, thank you, David. Nathaniel Stevens?
Thanks. Yeah, I would just echo what David White said about, I think we need to formally make a recommendation to the Arlington Board of Select Board to adopt this. And I just want to thank Mike for all his great work along with David White over the years. I do recall 25 years ago sitting down with them to help form the Friends of Arlington Great Meadows. And I believe Mike took the leadership on getting some grant money to improve or put in boardwalks.
Boardwalks.
Yeah, boardwalks. So just want to give him a shout out for that and thank him for all the great work. I'm fully supportive of this.
Great. Before I go to David Morgan, I'm going to just ask a couple questions myself. So these new trails, you're putting them in, you're not creating a trail, you're just blazing the trails. So there's not going to be any bark mulch or there's not going to be any topsoil altered. So the trail is visible. It's going to have to be, I guess, pounded down by foot.
That's correct. And the area seems open enough and compacted enough that there limited touching of the ground at all. I mean, rake the leaves out of the way additionally and that type of thing.
Sure. And do you see any spots in the future where you may need a some sort of bog bridge or boardwalk that's just not part of this project, but in the future you might have to do that?
Could happen. There are a few spots that we found that where an existing trail goes through a very muddy section. And we've actually tried to look for scouts to do those kind of projects, especially if they're small enough, like say in the under 50 to 60 foot range. But sort of volunteer bandwidth hasn't really caught up with that. But there are a few spots definitely in the meadows that could use more boardwalks. They're not as popular as the trails that have the boardwalk now. So we've kind of put them at on a lower priority.
Okay. I was curious about muddy spots because those always turn into boardwalks. And then the last question is, and I don't know who this is for, maybe David, but Mike, if you know the answer. I've seen bikes in there. Are they prohibited or it's just not openly allowed?
It's multi-use trail, let's say.
So it's okay to use a bike there. That's what I'm getting.
Consideration of others, yeah, sharing the trail.
Okay. Okay. That's all I had. David Morgan.
So today I was working on the proposal for those mitigation plantings in Lexington near Arlington Great Meadows on town-owned land, and talking with the town manager's office about it. I think we may be able to just go through the town manager's office for approval rather than getting on a select board agenda and waiting for a meeting to come along. The way that town manager would like to handle the mitigation planting is just to write a letter to Lexington Concom saying that the town grants permission for that work to be conducted. So just wanted to offer a potentially easier route for approval.
All right. Any further comments? Any comments from anyone attending tonight's meeting about this project? Mike, could you take down screen sharing so we can see people at the meeting? And seeing none, any comments from the commission or motions to, we're not approving the project, but we're, well, let's see what the motion is.
I'll make a motion to recommend to the town manager that he write a letter of support to the Lexington Conservation Commission
Do the process.
supporting this
Yeah,
Have a second?
I'll second that.
Great. David Kaplan,
Yes.
Mike Gildesgame,
Yes.
Susan Chapnick,
Yes.
Brian McBride,
Yes.
David White,
Yes,
Daniel Stevens,
Yes.
and Chuck Teroni says yes. All right, Mike, thank you.
Thank you,
25
Mike.
years.
Mike
Big-
and Keith, thank you very much for
Yeah.
your
Thanks.
work. And David
Yes.
White.
And David White. Yes. Thank you all.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your support and your time. And so we'll expect some kind of a notification from Arlington Town Manager or something to that effect.
David,
Yeah.
make sure he copies them.
Yeah, copy them.
Okay.
All
on-
right.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to let David Morgan talk to us about the conservation agent salary offset, which is something that we do every year. And we only get it right every other year. So hopefully this is the odd year and we get it right.
In the past, we've had the director of the department make this request. I don't think that's really necessary. We have all the information at our disposal. And I received from Deputy Town Manager Alex McGee the request itself after we had discussed with him our financial status at the end of last year and talked about our accounts moving forward into as far as FY26. So part of that discussion involved the hiring of a conservation administrator. And as you'll recall, the town has agreed to put in for a 20-hour-a-week position to start in FY26. Part of the sort of negotiating that we did with the town manager in order to secure that position was to agree to continue paying the offset for the conservation agent's salary. And that's 10% of my entire salary, my annual take home. So the request that came in from the deputy town manager is as follows. I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet, pull all of our numbers together this afternoon. Offset would be $87.63 for the year. I have our current funds available here totaling just over 15,000. And then this column explains our anticipated outlays for 2025. So we have the offset, which would come up at the start of the new fiscal year, July 1. Conservation administrator position that we are funding through July 1 would be roughly 7,000. The number that I just highlighted there is slightly lower than what we've committed to. We don't know yet what we're going to be paying this person. We also don't have a person hired, of course. So it will come out in those negotiations what exactly their rate is, but what we budgeted was for $30 an hour and 240 hours total. This number is 225 of those hours roughly. So we are slightly under, and together these numbers, we add them for you so you can see it. Come up almost exactly to what we currently have in the bank. The last thing that we have to pay this year is MACC dues to the tune of $760. I anticipate that we're going to have enough revenue in the first part of this year to make up any difference there. I would not think that we'd run into any trouble coming up with $1,000 or so. And that's pretty much it. The request then is to authorize 8763 in offset. Make that recommendation to, or tell them that we've authorized it, the town manager's office.
All right, thank you for that summary, David. Susan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just have a few questions. I'm always hesitant about drawing down, agreeing to pay for things ahead of time that's greater than what your fund balance is. So that's alarming. I thought that we had more than we have. So I'm concerned. Frankly, being fiscally responsible. I wouldn't say, oh, we can just expect this money to come in. I mean, being fiscally responsible, you don't plan to pay for things you don't have money in the bank for, or, I mean, I do understand we're going to get fees, but you never know what that's going to be. So I'm a little concerned about that. Yeah, I don't know where that leaves us. So this is talking about fiscal year. So does this start January, or is this fiscal year 2026 basically, which starts in June? When do these monies get allocated?
I presented a handful of timelines here. So this is our current snapshot, start of the calendar year, which is midway through our fiscal year. The offset would be taken out at the end of the fiscal year, start of the new one, July 1. The conservation administrator position starts when we hire someone and goes until that same date. And then the MACC dues are for FY26, so again would be invoiced in June of 2025, payable by August, the end of August actually. So we have 6-7 months to come up with these figures. I would also say that we're quite likely to not use the conservation administrator to the full 10-hour a week expected time.
Why is that?
We have, well, in the first place, we wanted them months ago, right? So we're still waiting to onboard. I think it'll probably be close to the end of the month before we get somebody fully hired and started in the position. I've allocated the 240 hours, which I think is going to wind up being somewhat lower than that. So we're looking at 225 budgeted, whereas if you take the 40 off the top, that would be for January, that would have been budgeted for January, then we're only looking at 200 hours across 5 months. So this could come down somewhat. Dues are not going to change, but again, that's in the new fiscal year, so there's plenty of time there. And I do hear you on the concern about not wanting to empty out the bank accounts. I also don't know where that leaves us, but I think it's fiscally responsible to forecast, that we've gotten about $10,000 in revenue over the past, well, let's say 2 years. It was quite a bit higher 3 years ago, but we certainly will come up with an amount that would cover the difference.
All right, let's go to David Kaplan.
Thanks. I'm less concerned, about drawing it down in the current year to pay for the administrator, the MAC fees, and the offset. But I'm just curious as what's our rate of accrual, and where would that leave us this time next year if we don't have that 15.5 for those recurring payments?
Yeah.
It seems like we could be short next year.
Yeah, we had some big projects come in last couple of years, so unless that happens again, that's unlikely to be the numbers we're looking at. Did I see someone else's hand? Mike Gildersgame?
Yes, I just had a question. I was maybe a little confused. I think you were saying that the numbers to the left, the 3909 and 11630, are calendar year numbers, whereas the other numbers are fiscal year. Is that correct? Did I misunderstand that?
That's currently what's in the bank.
Yeah. Oh, I see. That's currently what's in the bank. All right. I see. All right. I was just a little confused about that. We got it. Thanks.
Hey, David, I have a crazy idea. Why don't you, so I don't know who's it the town for this offset? Why don't you tell them the commission voted to give them $8,003? And if we make more money by the end of the fiscal year, we'll take another vote. But what our expenses, are higher than what we have. And I think that would satisfy everyone. And they could buy into your story about we'll make it. We make $10,000 a year, but at least we're dealing with, I mean, I agree with what Susan said. We shouldn't spend money we don't have. And if we can take this offset vote a month from now, 2 months from now, or change it. And the way I said, $8,003, that leaves $760 for MACC dues. And we can take another vote coming up. And I say it that way because it almost seems like, the offset for the town isn't a hard number, because if we didn't have the money, they would have to negotiate with us. And this is one of the times where it does look like we don't have the money, but it may come in. I don't know if anyone else has thoughts on that, but this would have been a great conversation to have, before tonight's meeting, just to find out if the town manager would agree to it, or comptroller. But since you didn't have that conversation, I bring it up.
That makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I still would like the answer to Dave Kaplan's run rate, though I would say that our run rate is very uneven, I think. For being, the last 10 years I've been on the commission, the numbers go up and down a lot.
Up and down, yes. Yes.
Yeah, but we're accepting, I don't know, David, you're going to answer this too, but let me just give it a shot. So if a permit comes in, typical permit is state fees, $42.50 or $67.50, and then the town fees are around $200 or so. So you're making about $300 a permit. Maybe we're making more here in Reading, in Arlington, but I would say that looks like 3 permits to me, even if they're a shed. So David, if you want to add to that, I don't know what you actually get each permit, but it's usually like 110 from the state, split in half, and the town fees are a little bit higher.
Yeah, it's like Susan said, highly variable, and like you pointed out, bigger projects will net bigger fees and so forth. I was just clicking through our totals to see what the what the amounts were that came in over those years. So, as I suggested, we're looking at $9,000-10,000 for the past couple of years.
Do you break it down by permit in here? What makes up that?
Our accounting software does, the spreadsheet does not.
Again, I think to me it looks like it's it's 3 permits. Probably 3 notices of intents, not 3 RDAs.
I would agree with that. I mean, I would also add that, we're trying to add capacity this year. We're trying to do it ourselves in anticipation of a bigger award of more capacity. And with that, I think that we would be able to drum up some of this. I mean, we tried in the past to get certificates of compliance. Didn't work for various reasons, but I think a more dedicated person who's sort of in the office, pounding the pavement to do this, to do the work, would be able to generate that revenue pretty easily. So it would offset some of their salary payments.
All right, I don't want to linger on this. Are there any more questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the offset of, as Chuck suggested, $8,003 for his position, conservation administrator position for 6,766, and then leaving 760 for MACC dues.
A second.
I'll second that.
David White seconds. David Kaplan,
Yes.
Susan Chapnick,
Yes.
Mike Gilderscame,
Yes.
Brian McBride,
Yes.
David White,
Yes.
Nathaniel Stevens,
Yes.
and Chuck Teroni says yes. All right. Now we've come to the first of our enforcement items on 335 Mystic Street. And as you know from our last meeting, 335 Mystic Street, we decided to try to speed these things up with the approval from the commission of a enforcement liaison. And our enforcement liaison for 335 Mystic Street is Sarah Alfaro Franco. And I know that she wants to update the commission. And so if Sarah, if you could unmute and discuss this project and let the commission know where we're at.
Yes, I sent an email to the owner of 335 Mystic on December 24th, introducing myself and basically asking for permission to do a site visit. I have not heard back from them. I did check my spam folder, so I am actually looking for input from the committee as to what the next steps should be.
Sure. So Sarah wrote an email. Me and Susan looked it over, and then Sarah sent it out. So we're.
When was it sent again? Sorry, what was the date?
It was
Sure.
December 24th in the morning.
Yeah, I would, just judging from my commute today, I would not expect a response necessarily from people until next Monday. Just, it seems like a lot of people are away for the extended holiday.
Okay.
Unfortunately, so maybe follow up again on Monday would be my suggestion.
Okay. Would you
Sure.
recommend a follow-up email?
Send the email again. Do we have a phone number for the owner?
I don't.
Yeah. David's shaking his yes. So maybe we can get that phone number to Sarah if she doesn't already have it.
I don't have it. But it, unless I missed it.
Okay.
Put it in the email I sent you, but I'll check and make sure.
Yeah. So if you're calling up and no one answers, you just want to take that opportunity to tell them that the date you sent something out, you're expecting a response, and that you'll be sending that original email back with a summary of your phone call. We will meet between meetings, you, me, Susan, and Mike. And if this person doesn't get back to you at that time, we'll come up with a new plan at that time. So that's probably next Thursday, I believe, next Thursday or Friday. So, all right. Any other questions on this one? It's tough when they don't get back to you, but I know it worked with David. And the only other thing that I could say to kind of make it seem more official, since she's talked to David, you could also put David's email on it.
Okay,
Okay.
understood. Thank you. Good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, and you should copy David Morgan just so that any correspondence is saved on the town server for public records request purposes.
Yeah, we're using the Arlington Conservation email, so that goes to Susan, myself, and David. So these aren't just Sarah out there on her own making decisions and sending emails. It's David and Susan, myself, working with them to make sure that the decisions are made correctly. Okay.
But the
So-
email doesn't come from the Comcom if Sarah's sending it.
No,
No,
See, that's unfortunate. It really should come from the Concom, even though she copies the Concom. So the Concom is on the email. Would have been nice if we could do that, but I guess we can't.
I don't see why we couldn't be CC'd as part of that.
Yeah.
And we've already said
We are
put
CC,
David.
right? Aren't you CCing Concom? Okay. So it gets recorded, but I'm just saying, other towns allow the commissioners to use the official emails. In fact, each commissioner has their own official email.
I was gonna say, we were offered years ago individual email addresses, town email addresses. Assume that's still an outstanding offer.
Yeah, maybe something that's for a different conversation, Chuck, but it may be something we might want to consider.
Worth investigating, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rather than using personal emails for these types of communications.
Yeah, I mean, if it seems to me we have a couple options coming up that
Yeah.
we can address.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. And I want to move right along to Mike Gildersgate. Did someone have
Okay, 40 Park Avenue. I've been in touch with Carter Knight, who's a manager of Davidson Management Company, which I guess is the representative of the owner, and also with Dan Wells of LEC Environmental Consultants. They've been quite responsive, and I have a site visit set up with them for this coming Monday at 10 a.m. on site, to which anyone is welcome to join us. Right now, as I understand it, the main issues with that project is the site restoration plan due to the commission by February 26th, followed by a discussion at the March 6th Conservation Commission meeting. They also need to be setting up interim measures to prevent parking or other trespass on the property, and make sure that the erosion control measures are maintained in place and in good working order. So they were very responsive, and we set up the meeting, and we'll see how things go.
That's great. Can you just let us know the date of that meeting again?
It is this coming Monday, which is, I think, the 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah, at 10 o'clock on site.
Okay. Sounds great. All right. Moving right along. Water Bodies Working Group. That's David White. David, you have anything to tell us about?
Working on the annual report and the budget, bring them to the next meeting for discussion.
That's great. I appreciate that. CPA Committee Liaison. That would be Brian I just saw
Before you
Susan
get to
quickly
that, Chuck,
flash her hand.
just real quick. The review of the water bodies budget and the review of the year in review plan, summary plan, takes some time. It always does every year.
It
Our
does.
next meeting is going to have Thorndike. Just putting it out there. Do you want to have that at that meeting? I'm just throwing it out there.
Good point, Susan.
Yeah, David, we we do not want that at that
You
meeting.
might want to have it the meeting after in February.
But you know what? If they,
Well,
well,
FinCom has the meeting for us too sometime in February, so we have to schedule
We
that.
don't know the
sometime-
date yet.
we
Okay.
get some time.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll
All
just
right,
have to
maybe
make
we'll
sure
be
we don't.
flexible. Because I think my eyes will glaze over if we have to do both of those in one meeting. I'm seeing Nathaniel nod his head too.
Well, the water board is more interesting, I think.
Oh, yeah, but you want to get it right, Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Okay, duly noted. CPA Liaison, which is Brian McBride. Do you have any updates?
Yeah, there's a doodle poll out right now for the upcoming final review of the final proposals that will be in the second or third week of January. I haven't seen yet who has submitted to follow up their preliminary applications. I'm assuming everyone resubmitted. We know that David resubmitted his two. I'm assuming everyone else did too, but I don't have any news on that. So I should have something by next meeting or the meeting after.
All right, great. Any questions? Okay, moving right along. Sims conservation restriction, that's Nathaniel Stevens.
No update from our last meeting. We have a meeting scheduled for, well, we have it on the books for next Thursday, but the ALT president asked to reschedule it, so we're looking for Wednesday. So hopefully I'll have a further update next meeting.
Okay, great. So that ends our discussion portion of this meeting, and we're going to go on to the hearing. So the hearing is DEP file number 910356, notice of intent for Thorndike Place, which we've had at the applicant's request. This hearing will be continued until January 16th. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
A second? And
Second.
David White has recused himself. Is that you, David Kaplan? Did you second?
I did.
Okay. Susan Chapnick,
Yes.
Mike Gildersgame,
Yes.
Brian McBride,
Yes.
Nathaniel Stevens,
Yes.
David Kaplan,
Yes.
and Chuck Tirone says yes. All right, so that's it, except I see that there's some people attended tonight's meeting. Was there something that we didn't anticipate on the agenda? Did someone, Carol or Sean, did you have something to say to the commission? Carol Walsh, Sean Keen.
I'm just an interested observer, and I'm very impressed with the proceedings, and thank you very much for your service to the town of Arlington.
Well, thank you, Carol. Always nice to hear. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, it sounds like we're good to go. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh.
And just everybody wave, and we're good, and enjoy the rest of the hockey game.
All right. Happy New Year.
Yep.
Good night.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
ACMi productions are only made possible with your support. Visit patreon.com/ACMi to learn how you can help.